During the millionaire's wedding, a mother of triplets burst into the church and took. The grand cathedral fell silent as the heavy wooden doors burst open. Madison stood there, her simple dress a stark contrast to the opulent wedding decorations, holding 3 sleeping infants in her trembling arms. The guests' whispers filled the air like a gathering storm. At the altar, Quentin's face drained of color as he recognized her, the maid he had cruelly cast aside months ago. But it wasn't just shame that struck him, it was the sight of the babies, their tiny faces so eerily similar to his own. Kiale, resplendent in her designer wedding gown, gripped her bouquet tighter, her knuckles turning white with fury. In the front row, an elderly woman named Eleanor watched the scene unfold, a secret burning in her heart that would change everything. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. In the quiet corners of St. Mary's Orphanage, young Madison learned early that life rarely offered second chances. Abandoned at the doorstep with nothing but a tattered blanket and a note bearing her name, she grew up watching other children find their forever homes while she remained behind. Yet it was this very circumstance that forged her resilient spirit. The nuns who raised her often remarked on her unwavering determination. While other children sought comfort in tears, Madison found solace in work. By age 7, she was helping in the orphanage kitchen, standing on wooden crates to reach the counters, learning to bake bread that filled the halls with warmth. Her small hands quickly became skilled at turning simple ingredients into something that brought smiles to other children's faces. "You have a gift," child sister Margaret would say, watching Madison knead dough with practiced precision. "Your hands know how to create joy." These words would echo through the years, becoming a foundation for her future, though she couldn't know it then. Despite the hardships, Madison never allowed bitterness to take root in her heart. Instead, she developed a deep understanding of the value of kindness, having experienced both its presence and absence. The occasional visitors who passed through the orphanage, dropping off donations or considering adoption, often noticed her not for her beauty or charm, but for her quiet strength and the gentle way she cared for younger children. When she aged out of the orphanage at 18, Madison carried with her not bitter memories, but lessons in survival and the importance of creating one's own family through bonds of love rather than blood. The nuns had taught her to read, write, and keep accounts, but more importantly, they had shown her that dignity came from within, not from possessions or status. Across the city, in a world of marble floors and crystal chandeliers, Quentin's story unfolded differently, yet with its own share of pain. Adopted at age 3 by wealthy industrialist Richard Montgomery, he became heir to one of the city's largest fortunes. But privilege came with its own price. Richard Montgomery, while providing every material comfort, was a man obsessed with status and legacy. He had chosen Quentin from the exclusive Brightwood Children's Home, selecting him for his sharp features and quick mind, seeing in him the potential for a worthy heir. What young Quentin never knew was that his adoption had been carefully orchestrated by someone who watched from afar his birth mother, Eleanor Grace. Eleanor's story was one of sacrifice and secret pain. 25 years ago, as a young woman from a once prestigious family fallen into hard times, she had fallen in love with Richard Montgomery himself. Their brief affair resulted in pregnancy, but Richard's family threatened to destroy her if she revealed the truth. Forced to give up her baby, Eleanor had carefully arranged for him to be placed in Brightwood, knowing Richard's preference for adopting from there. She watched from a distance as Richard, unaware he was adopting his own son, raised Quentin to be his heir. Eleanor built a new life for herself, gradually amassing her own fortune through careful investments, but never losing sight of her son. She attended his school graduations from afar, kept newspaper clippings of his achievements, and silently celebrated his successes while nursing the deep wound of their separation. Quentin grew up feeling the constant pressure to prove himself worthy of the Montgomery name. Every achievement was measured against impossibly high standards, every failure met with quiet disappointment that cut deeper than any punishment. He learned early that love in his world was conditional, based on performance and appearance. Remember, son Richard would say, adjusting Quentin's tie before social events, we're not just wealthy, we're Montgomerys. Everything you do reflects on our name. These words became Quentin's prison, shaping his views on wealth, status, and worth. His drive for success became almost obsessive. Top of his class at private school, captain of the debate team, youngest executive in his father's company, Quentin collected achievements like armor against the gnawing fear that he might never truly belong in the Montgomery world. He developed a sharp eye for social class, unconsciously mirroring his adoptive father's prejudices. Eleanor watched this transformation with growing concern. The sweet boy she had given up was becoming hardened by wealth and privilege. She saw him start to measure people's worth by their bank accounts rather than their character, and it broke her heart. But she couldn't reveal herself. The time never seemed right, the consequences too unpredictable. The three lives, Madison's, Quentin's, and Eleanor's, moved in separate orbits, each shaped by love, loss, and the choices forced upon them. Madison learned to find strength in simplicity, Quentin sought validation through achievement, and Eleanor carried the weight of her secret like a cross. Their paths might never have crossed if not for a simple twist of fate: a job posting for a housekeeper position at the Montgomery mansion. Madison, with her impeccable references from the orphanage and her quiet dignity, was hired despite her youth. And so began the intersection of their stories, though none of them could have predicted how their lives would become intertwined. Eleanor, who had maintained a careful distance from the Montgomery household for decades, found herself drawn back into their orbit when she learned of Madison's employment. Something about the young woman's story resonated with her. Perhaps she saw in Madison's resilience a reflection of her own youth, or perhaps it was simply fate's way of bringing her closer to the son she had never stopped loving. The mansion became the crucible where their stories would merge and transform, where secrets would surface and lives would change forever. But on that first day, as Madison walked through the imposing front doors, Quentin barely glanced at her from his study window, and Eleanor sat in her distant apartment, studying old photographs of a baby she had given up, none of them aware of the profound ways their lives were about to change. Their stories, born of loss and shaped by circumstance, were about to collide in ways that would test their strength, challenge their beliefs, and ultimately reveal the true meaning of family and love. The mansion's marble halls would soon echo with the consequences of long-buried secrets and the unstoppable force of hearts finding their way home. In the glittering world of high society, Claire Alexandra Rothschild harbored a darkness behind her perfect smile. 10 years ago, her father's shipping empire had crumbled overnight after a hostile takeover by Montgomery Industries. She watched her father drink himself to death, her mother flee to Europe with her tennis instructor, and their family name become a cautionary tale at country club gatherings. One day she had whispered to her father's portrait, "I'll make them pay for what they did to us now." Engaged to Quentin Montgomery, she was perfectly positioned for her revenge. Every smile she gave him was calculated, every kiss a move in her elaborate game. The irony that Quentin wasn't Richard's biological son would make her victory even sweeter. The Montgomery mansion stood as a monument to old money and rigid social hierarchies. Built in the 1920s, its limestone facade and manicured gardens spoke of generational wealth and careful preservation of status. Inside, invisible lines divided the spaces: the family wing with its imported marble and hand-painted ceilings, the public rooms where business deals were sealed over brandy, and the service areas where staff moved like shadows, maintaining the illusion of effortless luxury. Madison quickly learned these unspoken boundaries. The service entrance at the back, the narrow stairs to avoid being seen by guests, the precise timing of meals and cleaning to maintain the family's privacy. Yet even in these constraints, she found ways to make the space her own. The kitchen became her sanctuary, especially late at night when the family was asleep and she could experiment with baking, filling the air with the comfort of vanilla and cinnamon. It was during one of these late-night baking sessions that Quentin first truly saw Madison. Unable to sleep, plagued by pressure from his latest business acquisition, he had wandered into the kitchen following the scent of fresh cookies. He found her there, flour on her cheek, humming softly as she worked. "Those smell amazing," he said, startling her. The simple honesty in his voice, so different from his usual carefully measured tones, surprised them both. That night marked the beginning of their secret meetings. In the kitchen's warm embrace, social barriers seemed to melt away. Quentin found himself sharing his fears and doubts, things he couldn't tell Kay or his father. Madison listened without judgment, offering wisdom gained from a life less privileged but more authentic. Their relationship evolved slowly, built on stolen moments and shared confidences. Late-night conversations over fresh baked goods turned into subtle touches, lingering glances, and finally, hidden kisses in the garden's shadows. For Quentin, Madison represented everything real and unpretentious that his world lacked. For Madison, he was both a dream and a danger she knew loving him could only end in heartbreak. Meanwhile, Kay watched everything with calculating eyes. She noticed the way Quentin's expression softened when Madison entered a room, how he seemed more relaxed after his late-night walks rather than feeling threatened. She saw an opportunity to add another layer to her revenge. When the time came, exposing this relationship would make Quentin's fall from grace even more spectacular. The mansion's very architecture seemed to conspire in keeping their secret. Hidden alcoves, servant passages, and the extensive gardens provided countless opportunities for clandestine meetings. Yet these same features emphasized the impossibility of their situation. Every secret doorway and back staircase was a reminder of the social chasm between them. Their romance bloomed in these hidden spaces, away from judging eyes and social expectations. Quentin found himself drawn to Madison's quiet strength, her ability to find joy in simple things. She taught him to bake bread, laughing at his clumsy first attempts, while he shared stories of his travels, painting pictures of places she'd only dreamed of seeing. But reality couldn't be kept at bay forever. During the day, Quentin played his role as the perfect heir and fiancé, while Madison cleaned the very rooms where he entertained Calais. The contrast was a constant reminder of their impossible situation. Sometimes their eyes would meet across a room during social gatherings, he in his tailored suit, she in her uniform, and the weight of their secret felt almost unbearable. Yet neither could bring themselves to end it. Their relationship, born in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, had become as essential as breathing. But like a flower blooming in shadow, it was both beautiful and fragile, destined either to wither in darkness or be destroyed by exposure to the harsh light of day. The winter months brought longer nights and more opportunities for Madison and Quentin to share stolen moments. Their secret meetings in the kitchen evolved into something deeper, more meaningful. Madison found herself opening up about her childhood in the orphanage, while Quentin shared his fears of never truly belonging in the Montgomery world. Their different backgrounds, rather than dividing them, created a bridge of understanding. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just playing a part," Quentin confessed one night, watching Madison knead bread dough. "Like everyone's waiting for me to make a mistake, to prove I don't deserve to be a Montgomery." Madison gently touched his hand, leaving a light dusting of flour. "You're more than your name," she said softly. "I see who you really are, and that person is enough." These quiet moments of vulnerability became their sanctuary. In the darkness of the garden maze, they shared their first real kiss, tender and hesitant, both aware of the dangerous line they were crossing. Soon their relationship deepened, passionate but always hidden, always careful to maintain appearances during daylight hours. But their careful dance of secrecy couldn't last forever. The first cracks appeared when Kay began spending more time at the mansion, planning their wedding with an almost obsessive attention to detail. Madison was forced to watch as Kay draped herself over Quentin, marking her territory while shooting knowing glances at the staff. One evening, Richard Montgomery called Quentin into his study. "Son," he said, swirling brandy in a crystal glass, "there are rumors about you and one of the maids. I trust they're unfounded." The threat in his voice was clear. Quentin felt his world beginning to tilt. That night he avoided the kitchen, avoided Madison's questioning eyes. The pressure was mounting: the wedding plans, his father's expectations, KLA's increasing demands, and his own conflicted heart. Everything came to a head on a rainy spring evening. Madison waited in their usual meeting place, but when Quentin finally appeared, his face was different, cold, distant, unrecognizable. "This needs to end," he said, his voice harsh. "I don't know what you thought this was, but it was never going to be anything serious. You're a maid, Madison. Did you really think you could be more than that?" Each word was carefully chosen to cut deep. Madison stood perfectly still, feeling her world crumble. "You don't mean that," she whispered. "This isn't you speaking, this is your father's voice, your fear talking." "No," Quentin snapped, his face hardening. "This is reality. I'm getting married to someone of my own class, someone who understands my world. You were a distraction, nothing more." The cruelty of his words hung in the air between them. Madison felt something inside her break, but she held herself tall. "I thought you were different," she said quietly. "I thought you saw beyond status and money. I was wrong." "You were," he agreed coldly. "Pack your things. I want you gone by tomorrow." After he left, Madison collapsed to the kitchen floor, her body shaking with silent sobs. The pain was physical, a crushing weight in her chest that made it hard to breathe. She had given him her heart, her trust, and he had thrown it back in her face, as if it meant nothing. What Madison didn't know yet was that she carried more than just a broken heart. The morning sickness started a few weeks later. At first she attributed it to stress and grief, but as the symptoms persisted, reality began to dawn. The small clinic in her new neighborhood confirmed her fears: she was pregnant. But the real shock came during the ultrasound. The technician's eyes widened, and she called in a doctor. Madison lay there, heart racing, as they pointed out not one, but 3 tiny heartbeats on the grainy screen. "Triplets," the doctor said gently, "and given your current situation, this will be a high-risk pregnancy." Madison's mind reeled. Triplets. 3 babies. 3 lives depending on her when she could barely support herself. She had found work as a cleaner in various houses, but the pay was minimal, and now her body was already showing signs of strain. The doctor's words blurred together as he listed the risks, the necessary precautions, the recommended care she would need. All Madison could think about was Quentin, living his privileged life, preparing for his society wedding, while she faced this enormous challenge alone. That night, in her tiny rented room, Madison placed her hand on her still flat stomach. "I don't know how," she whispered to her unborn children, "but I'll find a way. I'll give you everything you need. We'll make it somehow." The pregnancy progressed, bringing with it mounting challenges. Morning sickness lasted all day, making it difficult to work. Her body, carrying 3 lives, tired easily. The doctor's warnings about the high-risk nature of the pregnancy echoed in her mind, but she couldn't afford to stop working. She thought about telling Quentin. Several times she drafted letters or picked up the phone, but his cruel words would echo in her memory, stopping her. "You're just a maid. How would he react to news of the triplets? Would he even believe they were his, or would he assume she was trying to trap him, extort money from him?" Meanwhile, news of Quentin's engagement to KLA filled the society pages. Madison would catch glimpses of their photos, Quentin in expensive suits, KLA draped in designer wear, both smiling for the cameras. Their wedding was being touted as the social event of the year. As her belly grew, hiding her condition became impossible. She lost cleaning jobs as clients noticed her pregnancy, making her financial situation even more desperate. The small room she rented barely had space for her, let alone 3 babies. Medical bills piled up, and the doctor's concerns about her working through the pregnancy became more urgent. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Madison felt sharp pains that sent her into a panic. At the emergency room, the doctor warned her that she was risking both her health and the baby's by continuing to work so hard. But what choice did she have? It was during one of these hospital visits that she first met Eleanor. The elegant older woman was there for a routine checkup when she noticed Madison struggling to fill out financial assistance forms with trembling hands. Something about Madison's quiet dignity and obvious distress touched Eleanor's heart. She approached carefully, offering help with the paperwork. As they talked, Eleanor felt an inexplicable connection to this young woman, not knowing that she was carrying her own grandchildren. Madison found herself sharing her story with Eleanor, something about the older woman's gentle presence making it safe to open up. Eleanor listened without judgment, her heart breaking for this brave young woman and the situation she was in. "Let me help you," Eleanor offered, her voice kind but firm. Not charity, just one human being helping another. Madison wanted to refuse, her pride and independence making her hesitate. But the babies moved within her, as if reminding her that this wasn't just about her anymore. She had to think of them, had to give them their best chance. That day marked a turning point. Eleanor became Madison's lifeline, helping with medical bills, ensuring she got proper care, and eventually offering her a place to stay. What neither woman knew was how deeply their lives were already connected, or how their bond would become even more profound in the months to come. The pregnancy continued, each day bringing new challenges and fears. Madison's body strained under the weight of carrying 3 babies, while her mind wrestled with decisions about their future. Should she try to contact Quentin? Should she leave the city entirely? What kind of life could she provide for 3 children on her own? Through it all, she kept working as much as she safely could, saving every penny, preparing as best she could for the monumental task ahead. Her strength amazed even herself. The same resilience that had sustained her through years in the orphanage now focused entirely on protecting and providing for her unborn children. But fate wasn't finished testing her. As her pregnancy progressed, complications arose that would force her to make impossible choices, face her past, and discover just how far she would go to protect the lives growing within her. During Madison's 20th week of pregnancy, a routine checkup revealed alarming news. One of the triplets showed signs of a heart defect, and all 3 babies were measuring smaller than they should be. The specialist's words hit her like physical blows, high-risk, intensive monitoring, potential complications. Without proper care and immediate bed rest, you could lose all 3 babies, the doctor explained gravely. The one with the heart condition will call him baby and needs specialized monitoring. The costs. He paused, looking at her worn clothes and tired eyes. The costs will be substantial. Madison left the hospital clutching a stack of papers, prescriptions, care instructions, and bills that already exceeded her life savings. The world seemed to spin around her as she struggled to process the information. On the hospital steps, her legs gave way, and that's when Eleanor appeared again. "My dear, let me help you up," Eleanor said, her elegant hand reaching out. She had been watching Madison from afar, drawn by some inexplicable instinct to protect this young woman. The sight of Madison's despair awakened something deep within her, memories of her own painful choices, her own lost chances at motherhood. Eleanor's intervention came at the critical moment. She didn't just offer financial help, she opened her home to Madison, converting her spacious guest room into a comfortable space for the mother-to-be. "You need rest, proper nutrition, and peace of mind," Eleanor insisted. "Let me provide that, at least." Madison's pride warred with her desperate need to protect her babies. "I can't accept so much from a stranger," she protested weakly. Eleanor's eyes softened. "Sometimes, dear, angels come in strangers' clothing. Let me be your angel for now." Life at Eleanor's became a sharp contrast to Madison's previous struggles. Eleanor's cook prepared nutritious meals, her housekeeper maintained the space, and Madison finally had the rest her body desperately needed. Yet the medical complications continued to mount. At 26 weeks, Madison woke to bleeding and crushing pain. The emergency room became a blur of activity, doctors shouting orders, nurses rushing, monitors beeping. "We need to stop the labor," someone said. "They're too small to survive birth now." For 3 days, Madison lay in the hospital, her body pumped full of medications to prevent premature labor. Eleanor never left her side, holding her hand through the worst contractions, whispering encouragement, being the mother Madison had never had. The baby survived that scare, but baby A's heart condition worsened. The specialist recommended in utero surgery, a risky, expensive procedure. Without it, his chances are slim, the cardiac specialist explained. With it, there's hope. Eleanor didn't hesitate. "Schedule the surgery," she told the doctors, her voice firm. "I'll handle the costs." When Madison tried to protest, Eleanor simply held her hand tighter. "Some things are worth any price." The surgery was a success, but the recovery was brutal. Madison's body, already strained by carrying triplets, struggled to heal. She developed preeclampsia, requiring constant monitoring. Every day became a battle for survival, not just for the babies, but for Madison herself. Through it all, Eleanor's support never wavered. She hired the best specialists, arranged for home care, and most importantly, provided the emotional support Madison desperately needed. Late at night, when fear and doubt crept in, Eleanor would sit with Madison, sharing stories of her own life, carefully avoiding any mention of her connection to Quentin. Meanwhile, news of Quentin's approaching wedding appeared regularly in the society pages. The date was set for when Madison would be 34 weeks pregnant, a critical time for the triplets. The irony wasn't lost on her. At 32 weeks, Madison's water broke. The hospital erupted into controlled chaos as doctors rushed to prepare for an emergency C-section. The babies would be premature, their survival uncertain. Baby A's heart condition added another layer of risk. "Stay with me," Madison begged Eleanor as they wheeled her into surgery. "I can't do this alone." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "You're not alone, dear. You'll never be alone again." The delivery was complicated. Madison hemorrhaged, requiring multiple transfusions. The babies, tiny and fragile, were rushed to the NICU. Hours passed before Madison regained consciousness, Eleanor still faithfully by her side. "Your children are fighters," Eleanor told her, "just like their mother." The next weeks became a blur of NICU visits, medical procedures, and gradual recovery. Baby A required immediate heart surgery. The other two, though stronger, still needed intensive care. Madison spent every possible moment with them, singing softly, touching their tiny hands through incubator walls, willing them to survive. Eleanor arranged for the best pediatric care, sparing no expense. She watched Madison's devotion to her children with a mixture of pride and pain, seeing in her the strength she wished she'd had when faced with her own impossible choice years ago. As the babies grew stronger, Madison began to plan for their future. She knew the struggle wasn't over, it was just beginning. But something had changed in her. The girl who had once been abandoned at an orphanage had become a fierce mother, ready to fight any battle for her children. What she didn't know was that the biggest battle still lay ahead, the confrontation that would bring all their secrets into the light, forever changing the lives of everyone involved. As she watched her babies grow stronger each day, Madison began to form a plan. Quentin needed to know the truth, and his wedding day would be when all masks would finally fall. The day Madison went into premature labor was marked by chaos and fear. At 32 weeks pregnant, her body could no longer sustain the strain of carrying triplets. The contractions began in the early hours, each wave of pain more intense than the last. Eleanor rushed her to the hospital, their previous careful preparations forgotten in the urgency of the moment. "We need to stop this labor," the doctor announced, his face grave as he reviewed Madison's complicated medical history. "The babies are too small, especially baby A with his heart condition. Every hour we can keep them inside increases their chances." But Madison's body had other plans. Despite medication and intervention, the contractions intensified. Hours passed in a blur of pain and mounting anxiety. Monitors beeped urgently, tracking 3 tiny heartbeats that seemed to grow more erratic with each passing moment. "We're losing baby A's heartbeat," a nurse called out suddenly. The room erupted into focused panic. Madison caught fragments of medical terminology being thrown around: fetal distress, emergency C-section, critical condition. Eleanor gripped Madison's hand tightly as they rushed her to the operating room. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not leaving you." Madison's last conscious thought before the anesthesia took hold was a desperate prayer for her children's survival. The surgery was complicated by Madison's severe preeclampsia. Her blood pressure spiked dangerously, and she began hemorrhaging. The medical team worked frantically to save both mother and babies. One doctor focused solely on baby A, knowing his heart condition made him especially vulnerable. "First baby out," someone announced. A tiny cry, weak but present, filled the room. "Second baby," another cry, slightly stronger. Then came the critical moment: baby A's delivery. The silence that followed was deafening. "No heartbeat," the doctor called out. A team of specialists immediately began working on the tiny infant while the surgeons struggled to control Madison's bleeding. Eleanor, watching from behind a glass partition, felt her own heart nearly stop. Minutes that felt like hours passed before a third cry, faint but determined, joined its siblings. Baby A had survived the delivery, but his battle was far from over. All 3 infants were rushed to the NICU, each weighing less than 3 pounds. Madison's recovery was complicated by blood loss and infection. She drifted in and out of consciousness for days, her body struggling to heal. Eleanor never left the hospital, dividing her time between Madison's bedside and the NICU, where 3 tiny lives hung in the balance. Baby A's condition deteriorated rapidly in the first 48 hours. His small heart struggled to function, and the doctors recommended immediate surgery. The cost would be astronomical, far beyond anything Madison could hope to afford, even with Eleanor's help. "We need to transfer him to a specialized cardiac unit," the doctor explained. But without insurance or upfront payment, he left the sentence hanging, his expression apologetic but firm. Eleanor immediately stepped forward. "I'll handle all costs," she declared. "Just save him." The surgery was scheduled, but complications arose. Baby A's heart began failing faster than expected. The specialist worked through the night, performing a delicate procedure on a heart the size of a strawberry. Hours passed with no news. Meanwhile, Madison finally regained consciousness. The first thing she asked for were her babies. Eleanor had to explain the situation gently, watching as Madison's face crumpled with fear and guilt. "It's my fault," Madison whispered. "If I had taken better care of myself, if I hadn't worked so hard." Eleanor clasped her hand firmly. "Stop that right now. You've been nothing but strong and brave. Your babies are fighters, just like their mother." The next weeks became a blur of NICU visits, medical updates, and gradual healing. Madison, still weak from her own ordeal, insisted on being wheeled to see her children as soon as she could sit up. The sight of them, so tiny in their incubators, covered in tubes and wires, broke her heart and strengthened her resolve. Baby A's surgery was successful, but he needed multiple follow-up procedures. His siblings, though stronger, still faced the challenges of extreme prematurity. Every day brought new hurdles, new fears, and new small victories. Madison learned to navigate the complex world of the NICU. She memorized medical terms, understood the meaning of every beep and alarm, and spent hours doing kangaroo care, holding her baby's skin to skin when allowed. The nurses marveled at her dedication, never knowing she had once been abandoned herself. Eleanor watched it all with a mixture of pride and growing love. She saw in Madison the mother she wished she had been brave enough to be for Quentin. The strength it took to fight for these babies, to never give up hope, touched something deep in Eleanor's soul. The financial burden grew exponentially. Even with Eleanor's help, the medical bills were staggering. Madison received notice that her small savings had been completely depleted. The hospital's financial department began sending warning letters about outstanding balances. One morning, a hospital administrator approached Madison with forms for transferring the babies to a public facility once they were stable. "The costs here are simply too high," he explained, not unkindly. "We need to discuss more affordable options." Madison felt her world tilting again. The public facility had a much higher mortality rate for premature infants. Baby A's specialized care wouldn't be available there. The thought of moving her fragile babies to a less equipped facility terrified her. Eleanor, overhearing the conversation, stepped in once more. "That won't be necessary," she said firmly. "I'm handling all expenses moving forward." The administrator began to protest about proper procedures and documentation, but Eleanor's quiet authority silenced him. Later that night, Madison found Eleanor crying softly in the NICU family room. "I should have been this brave years ago," Eleanor whispered, more to herself than to Madison. "I should have fought this hard." Madison didn't understand the full meaning of those words then, but she felt the weight of them. She hugged Eleanor, these two women united by love and sacrifice, neither knowing just how deeply their lives were intertwined. Days turned into weeks. The babies grew stronger, though Baby A's recovery was slower than his siblings. Madison practically lived at the hospital, learning to care for their special needs, preparing for the day she could take them home. But home was another worry. Her tiny rented room was no place for 3 infants, especially one with ongoing medical needs. Eleanor had already offered her house, but Madison's pride made her hesitate. She had already accepted so much. Sometimes Eleanor told her one evening, accepting help is its own kind of strength. These babies need more than just love. They need stability, space to grow, proper care. Let me provide that. Madison looked at her 3 tiny fighters, each one gaining strength day by day. Baby A had survived against all odds. His siblings were thriving. They deserved every chance at a good life, even if it meant swallowing her pride. What Madison didn't know was that fate had more twists in store. As she focused on her baby's survival across town, preparations for Quentin's wedding continued. The collision course of their lives was set, though none of them could predict the explosive revelations that would soon change everything. Eleanor's intervention extended far beyond financial support. Each day, as she watched Madison with the triplets, her own secret weighed heavier on her heart. She saw Quentin's features in their tiny faces, the same nose, the same determined set of their mouths when they cried. These were her grandchildren, fighting for life without anyone knowing their true heritage. Late one night, as Madison dozed in the NICU chair, Eleanor found herself alone with Baby A. Touching the incubator gently, she whispered, "I failed your father, little one. I won't fail you." The baby's monitors beeped steadily, as if responding to her promise. Madison's determination grew stronger with each passing day. Despite her exhaustion, she learned every aspect of her baby's care. She meticulously documented their progress, kept detailed notes of their medications, and worked with physical therapists to understand their developmental needs. "You're a natural," one nurse commented, watching Madison confidently handle her babies despite the maze of tubes and monitors. "Some mothers are too afraid to even touch them at this stage." "They need to know I'm here," Madison replied softly. That they're not alone. The words held extra weight, coming from someone who had grown up without that certainty herself. The truth about Eleanor's identity emerged gradually, like a photograph slowly developing. It started with small things: her unusual knowledge of the Montgomery family history, her intense interest in Quentin's childhood photos in the society pages, the way she sometimes slipped and almost called him "my son." One afternoon, while organizing medical documents, Madison found an old newspaper clipping that had fallen from Eleanor's purse. It showed a young Eleanor with Richard Montgomery, their faces close, intimate. The date on the article matched roughly with Quentin's birth. That same evening, Madison overheard Eleanor on the phone, arguing with someone about Quentin's upcoming wedding. "He's making the same mistake I did," Eleanor said, her voice breaking, "letting others dictate his happiness." The pieces began falling into place. Madison observed Eleanor more closely, the way she traced baby A's features through the incubator glass, her profound knowledge of Quentin's childhood ailments, the tears that came whenever the babies reached new milestones. The final confirmation came during a particularly difficult night. Baby A had taken a turn for the worse, requiring emergency intervention. As they waited outside the NICU, Eleanor broke down. "I can't lose them," she sobbed. "Not like I lost him. I gave up my baby once for the Montgomery name, for their precious reputation. I watched others raise my son, shape him into someone he was never meant to be." Madison stood frozen, the truth finally clear. "You're Quentin's mother," she whispered, "his real mother." Eleanor's face crumpled. "I was young, in love with Richard Montgomery. When I got pregnant, his family threatened to destroy everything, my family's remaining dignity, my future, everything. They forced me to give up my baby. Arranged the adoption through their preferred agency. I've spent 25 years watching my son from a distance, seeing him turn into someone as cold and status-obsessed as them. The revelation changed everything. Madison understood now why Eleanor had been so drawn to help her, why she'd invested so much in the triplets' survival. These babies were her chance at redemption, at preserving the family bonds she'd been forced to sacrifice. "Does Quentin know?" Madison asked quietly. Eleanor shook her head. "I've tried to tell him so many times over the years, but how do you tell someone that their whole life has been built on lies, that their real mother has been watching from the shadows, too cowardly to claim them?" Madison took Eleanor's hand, feeling the older woman's pain as if it were her own. "It's not too late," she said. "These babies, they're your grandchildren. They're a second chance for all of us." The truth created a new bond between the two women. They were both mothers who had suffered for love, who had faced impossible choices. Eleanor's wealth and Madison's poverty seemed insignificant compared to their shared determination to protect these innocent lives. But the revelation also brought new complications. The upcoming wedding, KLA's careful plans, Quentin's carefully constructed world, everything would shatter when the truth emerged. And emerge it must, for the baby's sake if nothing else. "He deserves to know everything," Madison declared. "About the babies, about you, about who he really is. These children deserve to know their father, and he deserves to know his real mother." Eleanor agreed, but fear still held her back. "The Montgomerys will fight this. They'll try to discredit you, deny the baby's paternity, possibly even try to take them away." "Let them try," Madison's voice was steel. "I fought too hard for these babies to let anyone threaten them now. We'll face whatever comes together." Their conversation was interrupted by a nurse announcing they could return to baby A's bedside. The crisis had passed, but it had cemented their resolve. The time for secrets was ending. As they watched the tiny fighter in his incubator, grandmother and mother united in love and purpose, they began to plan. The wedding was approaching a perfect stage for all truths to be revealed. But neither woman could predict just how explosive those revelations would be, or how they would reshape all their lives forever. The babies grew stronger each day, as if sensing the brewing storm and gathering strength for what was to come. Their small victories, the first time breathing without assistance, the first full feeding, the first real cry, became rallying points for the difficult path ahead. Eleanor and Madison's shared secret created a fortress of determination around the NICU. They would protect these children, fight for their rights, and ensure they grew up knowing both truth and love. The Montgomery name and all its power meant nothing compared to the strength of these two women united in purpose. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of power and privilege, revealing that true family bonds are forged not by blood or social status, but by love and courage in the face of impossible odds. In the warm glow of Eleanor's spacious kitchen, Madison found her path to independence. What started as therapeutic baking sessions during sleepless nights with the triplets evolved into something more. Her first paying customer was Eleanor's friend, who tasted Madison's lemon drizzle cake during a visit and immediately ordered one for her daughter's engagement party. Word spread quickly through Eleanor's social circle about the young mother who created extraordinary desserts. Orders began trickling in, first for small gatherings, then for larger events. Madison's natural talent, combined with the recipes she'd perfected during her years at the orphanage, created something unique in the high-end market. "You have a gift," Eleanor observed, watching Madison expertly decorate a wedding cake. "Your hands create more than just desserts, they create memories." With Eleanor's encouragement and initial investment, Madison transformed part of the ground floor into a small bakery. The space, with its large windows and intimate atmosphere, quickly became known for both its exquisite creations and the touching story of its owner. The triplets, now stronger and thriving, became fixtures in the bakery. Customers would smile at the sight of three identical toddlers helping their mother, usually creating more mess than assistance. Their presence added to the bakery's charm, making it feel less like a business and more like a home. Meanwhile, across town, Quentin's engagement to Claire dominated society headlines. Their wedding plans grew more elaborate with each passing week. Claire insisted on the grandest venue, the most expensive flowers, the most exclusive guest list. Each detail was carefully calculated to showcase their status and wealth. The wedding of the decade, society columns proclaimed. Photos showed Claire draped in designer wear, her smile perfect, but never quite reaching her eyes. Quentin stood beside her in these images, his expression increasingly strained, though few noticed. What the papers didn't capture were Claire's private moments of calculation. She spent hours in her study, reviewing old documents about Montgomery Industries' takeover of her father's company. Her wedding plans included subtle references to her family's past glory, a final mockery before she enacted her revenge. The triplets grew stronger each day, their distinct personalities emerging. Baby A, the fighter with the heart condition, became the quietest but most observant. His siblings were more boisterous, but all three shared an extraordinary bond. Madison watched them with wonder, seeing pieces of Quentin in their expressions, their mannerisms. And Eleanor's relationship with Madison deepened beyond their shared secret. She became not just a benefactor but a true mother figure, filling the void in Madison's life while trying to make up for her own past choices. Together, they created a unique family unit bound by love rather than convention. The bakery's success brought unexpected challenges. As Madison's reputation grew, so did interest in her background. Society ladies who ordered her cakes began asking questions, making connections. Some remembered her from her time as the Montgomery's maid. One afternoon, Claire herself walked into the bakery. Madison froze, her hands deep in bread dough, as her former rival surveyed the space with calculated interest. "So this is where you disappeared," Claire remarked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "How?" Quaint, her eyes lingered on the playing triplets, narrowing slightly as she noticed their features. Madison stood her ground, her voice steady. "Can I help you with something?" "Just curious about the competition. Everyone's talking about this charming little bakery." Claire's gaze returned to the children. "Interesting timing, isn't it? Opening a business so close to the wedding." The threat in her words was clear. Madison felt her heart race but kept her expression neutral. "Your wedding cake order wasn't placed with us. Perhaps you'd like to discuss business." Kie's laugh was cold. "Oh, I don't think that will be necessary. Good luck with your enterprise." She left, the bell above the door chiming ominously in her wake. That evening, Madison confided in Eleanor about the visit. She knows Madison worried, or at least suspects. The children's resemblance to Quentin is becoming more obvious every day. Eleanor's face was grim. "We need to be prepared. Kiele isn't just marrying Quentin for love or status, there's something else at play." The triplets continued to thrive, oblivious to the growing tension. They attended the best preschool, thanks to Eleanor's support, and excelled in their own ways. Baby A, despite his ongoing medical needs, showed an extraordinary talent for music. His siblings were equally gifted, each developing distinct interests and personalities. Madison's bakery became more than just a business, it became a symbol of her resilience. She hired other single mothers, understanding their struggles. The kitchen that had once been her sanctuary became a place of opportunity for others facing similar challenges. Eleanor watched this transformation with pride and growing anxiety. The wedding date approached, and with it, the inevitable confrontation. She saw how Madison had built a life for herself and the children, how she'd turned her pain into purpose. The thought of it all being disrupted by the truth weighed heavily. The triplets' fourth birthday party was a turning point. Held in the bakery after hours, it was a small celebration with their preschool friends. Madison had created a spectacular cake, 3 tiers decorated with tiny musical notes for baby A, sports elements for his brother, and books for their sister. During the party, one of the society mothers who'd become a regular customer remarked on the children's striking resemblance to someone she knew. The comment hung in the air, heavy with implication. Madison saw Kiele's influence in the woman's knowing look. That night, after the children were asleep, Madison found Eleanor in the garden, looking at old photographs. "We can't keep hiding," Madison said softly. "The truth has a way of emerging, and I'd rather control how it comes out than let Kiele use it against us." Eleanor nodded, tears in her eyes. "I've been a coward for too long, watching you with the children, seeing your strength. It's shown me what I should have done years ago. Quentin deserves to know everything about me, about the children, about his real heritage." The bakery continued to flourish, but Madison's focus shifted. She began documenting everything: the children's birth certificates, medical records, photographs showing their remarkable resemblance to Quentin. She started writing letters, explaining everything from the beginning, though she wasn't sure she'd ever send them. As the wedding approached, tension mounted. Kiele's visits to the bakery became more frequent, each time with thinly veiled threats wrapped in social niceties. The society papers began publishing subtle hints about interesting developments in the Montgomery Rothschild wedding plans. Eleanor's health began to show signs of strain. The burden of her secrets, combined with the stress of protecting Madison and the children, took its toll. Yet she remained determined to see things through, to finally right the wrongs of the past. The triplets, now old enough to ask questions about their father, brought new challenges. Madison had always been honest with them, in age-appropriate ways, but their increasing curiosity about their father's absence became harder to navigate. One evening, Baby asked the question Madison had been dreading: "Mummy, why doesn't our daddy want us?" The question broke Madison's heart. She gathered all 3 children close, feeling their small arms wrap around her. "Your daddy doesn't know about you yet," she explained gently. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, but that doesn't mean you're not loved. You have me and Grandma Eleanor, and so many people who love you very much." The incident strengthened Madison's resolve. These children deserved to know their father, and Quentin deserved to know his children and his mother. The carefully constructed walls of secrets and lies had to come down. The bakery became her fortress, a place where she could plan and prepare while continuing to build her independence. Each successful event, each satisfied customer, added to her confidence. She was no longer the vulnerable maid who had been cast aside. She was a successful business owner, a mother, a survivor. Eleanor watched this transformation with a mixture of pride and regret. In Madison, she saw the strength she wished she'd had 25 years ago. In the triplets, she saw a chance to heal the wounds of the past. But time was running out, the wedding was approaching, and with it, the moment when all truths would have to be revealed. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of the Montgomery Empire and redefine the meaning of family for all involved. The question wasn't if the truth would come out, but how many lives would be forever changed when it did. Madison's internal conflict deepened as the wedding date approached. Each night, after closing the bakery and putting the triplets to bed, she would sit in her small office, staring at the invitation she'd managed to obtain. The elegant cream cardstock seemed to mock her with its golden lettering announcing Quentin's marriage to Kelly. "Am I doing the right thing?" she whispered to herself, touching the faces of her sleeping children. The decision to confront Quentin at his wedding warred with her desire to protect her carefully built new life. Her bakery was flourishing, her children were thriving, and Eleanor's support had given them stability they'd never had before. Yet each time baby needed another heart checkup, each time the twins asked about their father, the weight of her silence grew heavier. The truth wasn't just hers to keep anymore, it belonged to her children, to Eleanor, and yes, even to Quentin. Across town, Quentin found himself increasingly restless as his wedding approached. Kelly's behavior had begun to trouble him in ways he couldn't ignore. He caught her late at night in his father's study, rifling through old company documents. Her explanations about wanting to understand the family business rang hollow. During a dinner with their wedding planner, Kelly's mask slipped momentarily. "The Montgomery Empire will be quite different after the wedding," she remarked, a glint of something dangerous in her eyes. "Everything will change." The comment stayed with Quentin, nagging at him like a loose thread. He began paying closer attention to her interactions with his father's business associates, noting the calculated way she collected information, the subtle hints about past business dealings. One evening, he overheard her on the phone. "Once we're married, I'll have access to everything. Daddy's revenge will finally be complete." The words sent a chill down his spine, confirming his growing suspicions that their relationship wasn't what he'd believed. Meanwhile, Eleanor's world shattered quietly in a doctor's office on a sunny Tuesday morning. The diagnosis was unequivocal: advanced pancreatic cancer. The prognosis months, not years. She sat in her car afterward, hands trembling on the steering wheel, thinking of all the things still left undone. The truth about Quentin's parentage remained untold. Her grandchildren didn't know their true heritage. The carefully constructed support system she'd built for Madison and the triplets suddenly seemed terrifyingly temporary. That evening, Eleanor watched Madison closing up the bakery, observed the easy way she juggled the triplets' needs while managing her business. The sight of her grandchildren playing beneath the counter, their laughter echoing through the space, made her heart ache with the urgency of time slipping away. "I need to tell you something," Eleanor began that night, after the children were asleep. But looking at Madison's tired but content face, she couldn't bring herself to add another burden. Instead, she simply hugged her, holding on a moment too long. Madison noticed changes in Eleanor: frequent doctor's appointments, increasing fatigue, a new urgency in her interactions with the triplets. But whenever she tried to ask, Eleanor deflected with practiced ease. The weight of secrets began taking its toll on everyone. Quentin threw himself into work, avoiding wedding preparations and Kelly's increasingly obvious machinations. His doubts about the marriage grew stronger, but the momentum of family expectations and social obligations carried him forward like a river approaching a waterfall. One afternoon, he found himself driving past Madison's bakery. He'd heard about it through business circles, never realizing it belonged to her. Through the window, he saw children playing, 3 identical children whose features struck him with an uncomfortable familiarity. He sat in his car, watching the scene unfold inside the warm, inviting space. Madison moved with confidence, her smile genuine as she served customers. She was different from the maid he'd known, stronger, more assured. The sight stirred something in him, a recognition of what he'd thrown away. Eleanor, watching from her usual corner table, saw Quentin's car. Her heart raced with the possibility of confrontation, but he drove away before anyone else noticed. That night, her pain was worse than usual, and the urgency of revealing the truth became overwhelming. "Madison," she said during their nightly tea, "there's something you need to know. Something that can't wait much longer." But before she could continue, one of the triplets woke crying from a nightmare, and the moment slipped away. The wedding preparations continued relentlessly. Claire's true nature became more apparent as she issued cruel commands to staff, berated vendors, and spoke increasingly of the power she would wield as Mrs. Montgomery. Quentin watched her transformation with growing horror, remembering too late how he'd once treated Madison with similar contempt. Madison's conflict reached a breaking point when baby needed another surgery. The doctors were optimistic, but the recovery would be delicate. The timing coincided perfectly with the wedding date. "Maybe this is a sign," she told Eleanor. "Maybe I should focus on what I have instead of disrupting everyone's lives." Eleanor, pale from her latest round of secret treatments, took Madison's hand. "Some truths demand to be told, my dear. The cost of silence is often higher than the price of speaking out." The three adults circled each other unknowingly, Quentin growing more uncertain of his path, Madison struggling with her decision to reveal the truth, and Eleanor racing against time to right the wrongs of the past. Their collision course was set, but the outcome remained uncertain. Eleanor's declining health added urgency to every decision. She began putting her affairs in order quietly, ensuring Madison and the triplets would be protected no matter what happened. Each day brought new challenges, hiding her symptoms from the children, maintaining her strength for the confrontation she knew was coming, and carrying the burden of multiple life-changing secrets. The truth hung between them all like a sword waiting to fall, threatening to destroy the carefully constructed facades they'd all built. But as Eleanor watched her grandchildren grow, witnessed Madison's strength, and observed Quentin's growing doubts, she realized that sometimes destruction was necessary for rebuilding something stronger, truer, and more lasting than what had come before. The morning of Quentin's wedding dawned with an almost cruel perfection, clear skies and gentle sunshine that belied the storm about to break. Madison stood in the hospital's pediatric unit, torn between two impossible choices. Baby had developed complications from his recent surgery, his small body fighting against infection. The doctors were concerned, recommending constant monitoring. "Mummy, don't go," he whispered, his tiny hand clutching hers. His siblings sat quietly in the corner of the hospital room, unusually subdued, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Eleanor, looking frailer than ever but determined, touched Madison's shoulder. "I'll stay with him. You know what needs to be done." The choice weighed heavily on Madison's heart. Her child needed her, but so did the truth. If she didn't speak now, Claire's carefully orchestrated revenge would destroy not just Quentin, but potentially the future security of her children as well. Across town, the cathedral buzzed with activity. Flower arrangements worth small fortunes lined the aisles, photographers jockeyed for position, and guests in designer wear kissed and commented on the extravagance of it all. Claire, secluded in the bridal suite, made final adjustments to her plan. "Everything is in place," she murmured to herself, reviewing documents hidden within her wedding folder, proof of old corporate betrayals, evidence of Montgomery Industries' ruthless takeovers, including the destruction of her father's company. Today wasn't just her wedding day, it was her moment of triumph. Quentin stood before a mirror in a separate room, adjusting his tie with trembling hands. Something had felt wrong for months. Claire's increasingly obvious manipulations, her late-night phone calls, the calculating look in her eyes when she discussed their future. The image of Madison's bakery and those three children flashed in his mind again. Madison arrived at the cathedral just as the ceremony was about to begin. Her simple dress, though elegant, stood out among the obvious wealth on display. She clutched a folder containing birth certificates, medical records, and proof of her children's paternity. Her phone was set to vibrate. The hospital would contact her immediately if baby A's condition changed. The wedding march began to play. Claire appeared at the entrance, a vision in designer white, her smile triumphant. She began her walk down the aisle, each step bringing her closer to her moment of revenge. The guests murmured appreciatively, unaware of the drama about to unfold. Just as the priest began to speak, Madison stood. Her voice, though shaking slightly, carried clearly through the hushed cathedral. "I object to this marriage," she announced. The crowd gasped collectively, and there are 3 small children who have a right to object as well. Quentin turned, his face draining of color as he recognized her. Kia's perfect mask slipped for a moment, revealing fury beneath. The priest paused, confused by the interruption. "One of those children," Madison continued, her voice growing stronger, "is fighting for his life in the hospital right now. He has his father's eyes, his father's heart condition, the same one that runs in the Montgomery family." She walked forward, pulling out photographs of the triplets. "These are your children, Quentin, the ones you never knew about because you were too concerned with status and reputation to even consider that a maid might be worthy of truth." The cathedral erupted in whispers. Quentin stared at the photographs, recognition dawning in his eyes. The resemblance was undeniable, 3 small faces that mirrored his own childhood photos. Kiale's laugh cut through the chaos. "How convenient," she sneered. "A desperate attempt to ruin my wedding day. Do you really expect anyone to believe?" "I believe her," came a new voice. Eleanor stood at the entrance, pale but determined. "I believe her because those children are my grandchildren, just as Quentin is my son." The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Richard Montgomery stood up from his front row seat, his face ashen. He recognized Eleanor, immediately the woman he'd loved, the woman his family had forced him to abandon. "What is this?" Quentin demanded, his voice hoarse. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that 25 years ago, I was forced to give up my baby you to protect both our families' reputations," Eleanor explained. "I watched you grow up from a distance, unable to claim you as my own. When I met Madison and saw she was carrying your children, I couldn't stand by and let history repeat itself." Kiale's composure cracked completely. "You're all insane. This wedding will proceed. I've worked too hard, planned too long." "Planned what exactly?" Quentin asked, his voice dangerous. "What were you planning, Kiale?" In her fury, Kiale didn't notice her wedding folder falling, spilling its contents across the altar steps. Documents scattered detailed plans for corporate takeover, evidence of her father's revenge scheme, emails plotting the dismantling of Montgomery Industries from within. "You ruined my family," she screamed at Richard Montgomery. "Destroyed everything my father built. This marriage was just the beginning of making you pay." The guests watched in shocked silence as Kiale's carefully constructed facade crumbled. Security personnel, already on alert, moved closer as she became more erratic. "My father died because of you," she raged at Richard. "This was supposed to be my revenge. Everything was perfect." Madison stood quietly through the chaos, her phone clutched in her hand, praying it wouldn't ring with bad news from the hospital. The truth was out now, all of it, but at what cost? Quentin looked lost, his world turned upside down. His fiancée was a fraud, his mother wasn't who he thought, and somewhere in a hospital, his children he'd never known, were waiting. "The triplets," he said finally, turning to Madison. "They're really mine." "Yes," she answered simply. "Baby has your heart condition. He's in the hospital right now, fighting an infection after surgery. The other 2 are with him. They've never known their father, but they've never stopped needing one." The weight of his past choices crashed down on Quentin. He remembered his cruelty to Madison, his obsession with status, his blind acceptance of Kealay's manipulations. All of it seemed meaningless now. Richard Montgomery finally spoke, his voice heavy with regret. "I've made so many mistakes," he said, looking at Eleanor. "Forcing you to give up our son was the first and worst of them. Watching him become as cold and status-obsessed as my family, that was my punishment." Security had escorted the hysterical Kealay from the cathedral. The guests sat frozen, witnesses to the unraveling of carefully constructed lies spanning decades. For a moment no one moved, as if the weight of truth had paralyzed them all. The silence was broken by Madison's phone vibrating. Her heart stopped as she checked the message. "I have to go," she said urgently. "Baby A's fever is spiking. He needs me." "Take me with you," Quentin said quietly. "Please. I need to meet my children, all of them." Eleanor stepped forward, swaying slightly. "I'll come too, for however much time I have left." "What do you mean?" Quentin asked sharply, noticing for the first time how frail she looked. Later, Eleanor promised, "Right now, your son needs you." The three of them left the cathedral together, leaving behind the trappings of a wedding that had been built on lies. The guests would gossip about this day for years to come, how truth and love had triumphed over revenge and deception, how a simple baker had brought down an empire of lies. But for Madison, Quentin, and Eleanor, the real story was just beginning. They rushed to the hospital, where three small lives waited lives that would need all their strength, love, and truth to thrive in the aftermath of this day's revelations. Richard Montgomery stood amid the chaos of the abandoned wedding, his world crumbling around him. The cathedral, still adorned with expensive flowers and silk ribbons, now felt like a stage where his life's greatest failures had been exposed. As guests whispered and hurried out, he remained frozen, remembering a summer 25 years ago when he'd let his family dictate his heart's choices. So his assistant approached cautiously. "Shall I arrange for announcements about the wedding's cancellation?" Richard waved him away, his eyes fixed on a photograph Madison had dropped. Three small faces that could have been Quentin at that age, but more haunting was their resemblance to Eleanor in her youth. The same eyes that had looked at him with love, then hurt, then resignation all those years ago. His mind raced back to that fateful day when his parents had presented him with an ultimatum: end things with Eleanor, a girl from a fallen aristocratic family, or watch her family be destroyed completely. He'd chosen family obligation over love, never knowing she carried his grandchild. Following his son to the hospital, Richard arrived to find a scene that shook him to his core. Through the NICU window, he watched Quentin meeting his children for the first time. Baby A, small and fragile in his hospital bed, reached out a tiny hand to his father. The gesture, so innocent and trusting, broke something in Richard's carefully maintained facade. Eleanor stood in the corner, her face reflecting both joy and profound sadness. When she noticed Richard, her expression hardened. "Have you come to disapprove of these children too?" she asked quietly. "To protect the precious Montgomery name from another scandal?" "Eleanor," he breathed, his voice heavy with 25 years of regret. "If I had known what she challenged, that I was pregnant, that your son would grow up to repeat our mistakes, that your family's obsession with status would poison another generation." The truth poured out between them like a flood breaking through a dam. Eleanor revealed how she'd orchestrated Quentin's adoption, ensuring he would at least be raised by his biological father, even if neither knew the truth. She described years of watching from afar, seeing their son transform into something cold and hard, just like the family that had torn them apart. "I'm dying," Richard, she finally confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "Cancer. I needed the truth to come out before I couldn't protect them anymore." Inside the hospital room, Madison watched as Quentin tentatively bonded with his children. The twins had warmed to him quickly, but baby remained cautious, studying his father with serious eyes that seemed too old for his young face. "He has your heart condition," Madison explained softly. "The doctors say it's genetic, passed down through the Montgomery line. Rather ironic considering how much your family valued pure bloodlines." Quentin flinched at her words, understanding the layers of meaning. All his life, he'd tried to prove himself worthy of the Montgomery name, never knowing it was his by blood all along. The price of that pretense had almost been his own children's lives. Richard entered the room slowly, the weight of his choices visible in every step. The children looked at him curiously, their grandfather, though none of them knew it yet. Baby A's monitors beeped steadily, a rhythmic reminder of the fragility of life and truth. "Father," Quentin said, his voice strained, "did you know? About Eleanor. About me." Richard shook his head, tears forming in his eyes for the first time in decades. "I suspected sometimes. You have her smile, her way of tilting your head when you're thinking. But I convinced myself it was impossible. The adoption agency was so prestigious, the paperwork so perfect." "I made sure of that," Eleanor interjected, entering the room. "I wanted him to have every advantage, even if I couldn't claim him myself. The same advantages I hope these children will have, but without the price we all paid for status and appearances." The family secrets unraveled further as Eleanor explained how she'd built her own fortune, keeping tabs on Quentin's life through carefully placed connections, how she'd recognized Madison's strength and determination, seeing in her the courage she wished she'd had herself. "When I learned about the triplets," Eleanor continued, "I knew I couldn't let history repeat itself. These children deserved better than being hidden away because of pride and prejudice." Richard looked at his grandchildren, truly looked at them, and saw not a threat to his family's reputation, but a chance at redemption. In Baby A's fierce fight for life, he recognized Eleanor's determination. In the twins' quick smiles, he saw the joy he'd sacrificed for status. The Montgomery fortune, he declared suddenly, will be restructured. These children will be acknowledged, protected, provided for. And Eleanor, he turned to the woman he'd never stopped loving. "Whatever time you have left, let me try to make it right." The confession that followed was decades in the making. Richard revealed how his parents had threatened not just Eleanor's family, but her personal safety. How he'd chosen what he thought was protecting her, never knowing the full price of his decision. Eleanor's own confession was equally painful, how she'd watched their son grow up from afar, how terminal illness had finally given her the courage to speak the truth, how she'd found a second chance at motherhood through Madison and the triplets. In that hospital room, surrounded by beeping monitors and the innocent faces of children who knew nothing of social status or family pride, 3 generations of secrets and pain began to heal. The truth, finally spoken, offered not just liberation but the possibility of a new kind of family, one built on love and honesty rather than appearance and obligation. Eleanor's decline was swift and merciless. Within weeks of the wedding drama, her vibrant presence began to fade like a photograph left in the sun. She tried to hide her growing weakness from the children, but they sensed a change in their beloved grandmother. Baby A, especially, seemed to understand, often climbing carefully into her lap during her increasingly frequent rest periods. "Promise you won't forget me," she whispered to him one afternoon, when they thought no one could hear. The child's solemn nod broke Madison's heart as she watched from the doorway. The impact of Eleanor's illness rippled through their newly formed family like waves in a still pond. Madison struggled to maintain normalcy at the bakery while spending every possible moment at Eleanor's side. The business she'd built with such pride now seemed secondary to the precious time remaining with the woman who had saved her and her children. Quentin, still adjusting to fatherhood, found himself facing the imminent loss of the mother he'd only just discovered. He moved into Eleanor's house temporarily, wanting to make up for lost decades in whatever time remained. His presence brought both comfort and complicated emotions as the family tried to navigate their new reality. "I don't know how to be a son to you," he confessed one night, sitting by Eleanor's bedside. "I've spent my whole life trying to be Richard Montgomery's heir, and now." Eleanor reached for his hand, her grip weaker but still determined. "Just be yourself, Quentin. That's all I ever wanted for you." Richard Montgomery became a frequent visitor, his corporate persona crumbling more with each visit. He would sit for hours with Eleanor, their conversations soft but intense, making peace with their past while time slipped away like sand through their fingers. The triplets, too young to fully understand death, but old enough to sense its approach, showed their love in different ways. The twins drew endless pictures for their grandmother, covering her room with colorful artwork. Baby A, still recovering from his own health challenges, would simply hold her hand, their shared experience of physical fragility creating a special bond. Madison watched as her carefully constructed new life shifted and reformed around Eleanor's illness. The bakery became a gathering place for family meetings, its warm kitchen offering comfort when the hospital became too sterile, too real. "I need to put things in order," Eleanor insisted during one such gathering. "The children must be protected, their future secured." The legal documents were drawn up with careful precision. Eleanor's fortune, substantial but never flaunted, would be divided among her grandchildren, with provisions for their education and healthcare. The house would go to Madison, ensuring the children would always have a stable home. But money and property seemed insignificant compared to the emotional legacy Eleanor was trying to leave. She spent hours recording videos for the children, sharing stories of her life, her love for their father, the mistakes and triumphs that had shaped their family. Sometimes she told Madison during a rare moment alone, "Love means letting go of pride, of fear, of everything we think defines us. I learned that too late with Quentin, but watching you with these children, you've taught me it's never too late to choose love." The reconciliation between Eleanor and Richard proved both healing and heartbreaking. Their love, buried but never truly dead, bloomed again in the shadow of mortality. They would sit in the garden, holding hands like teenagers, making plans they knew would never come to pass. Quentin struggled to reconcile his two fathers, the man who had raised him with rigid expectations and the man he now saw tenderly caring for his dying first love. Richard, too, seemed caught between his past role as the austere Montgomery patriarch and his present reality as a man facing the consequences of choices made decades ago. The children, in their innocent wisdom, became the bridge between past and present. They accepted both grandfathers with equal enthusiasm, unconsciously healing old wounds with their unconditional love. As Eleanor's strength waned, the family drew closer. Madison rearranged the bakery's hours to spend afternoons at home. Quentin delegated more responsibilities at work, his previous obsession with corporate success fading in importance. "I was so wrong," he told Madison one evening, watching their children play in Eleanor's garden, "about everything that mattered. Status, money, social position. None of it means anything compared to this." The reconciliation wasn't always smooth. Years of hurt and misunderstanding couldn't be erased overnight. But Eleanor's illness created an urgency that pushed them past pride and pretense. They learned to talk honestly, to acknowledge past wounds while seeking healing. Through it all, Eleanor maintained her grace and wisdom. Even as cancer ravaged her body, her spirit remained strong. She used her remaining time to help heal the family she'd been forced to abandon, guiding them toward a future she wouldn't see. "My greatest regret," she told them during a family dinner, her voice weak but clear, "was letting fear of judgment control my choices. Don't make that mistake. Love freely, forgive quickly, and never let pride stand in the way of happiness." As autumn turned to winter, Eleanor's decline accelerated. The hospital visits became more frequent, the medical discussions more serious. Yet even in her weakest moments, she focused on strengthening the bonds between her newfound family members. She made Quentin promise to be the father she knew he could be, Richard vow to put love before duty, and Madison swear to keep telling their story to the children. Each promise was a thread connecting past to future, ensuring that the truth and love they'd finally found wouldn't be lost again. Quentin's path to redemption began not with his father's punishment, but with his own recognition of who he'd become. Richard stripped him of his executive position, assigning him to work as a janitor in the company building the same role Madison had once held in his home. "You'll start from the bottom," Richard declared. "Learn the value of every person who makes this company run, just as you should have valued Madison years ago." The first day Quentin donned the janitor's uniform was a harsh awakening. Former colleagues who had once fawned over him now barely acknowledged his existence. He cleaned floors he'd previously walked on without a second thought, emptied trash bins filled with memos he'd once written. Each day brought new humiliations and, with them, new understanding. He remembered how he'd treated Madison, how he'd dismissed her worth based solely on her position. The memory of his cruelty haunted him as he experienced firsthand the invisibility of service workers. Madison's emotional turmoil intensified as she watched Quentin's transformation. Part of her felt vindicated seeing him humbled, while another part ached at the genuine change she witnessed in him. The children's growing attachment to their father complicated her feelings further. "Mummy baby," asked one evening, "why are you sad when Daddy's here?" The question caught her off guard. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings she tried to explain, like when you're happy and scared at the same time. The children's struggles manifested in different ways. The twins became fiercely protective of their mother, sometimes refusing to let Quentin near her. Baby A, more sensitive to the undercurrents of adult emotions, withdrew into himself during family gatherings. But their confusion about having two grandfathers, one who had always been distant and another who now desperately wanted to make amends, added to their stress. They picked up on Eleanor's declining health, the tension between their parents, and the whispers about their family's scandal. Quentin's redemption came slowly, earned through countless small moments of humility and growth. He learned every employee's name in the building, thanked the cleaning staff, and began to see worth beyond wealth and status. At home, he dedicated himself to earning his children's trust. He attended every medical appointment for baby A, learned about his heart condition, and showed up consistently even when the children were reluctant to accept him. Madison watched this transformation with mixed emotions. The man who emerged from this punishment was closer to the one she'd fallen in love with in the kitchen years ago, but the scars of his betrayal ran deep. "I know I can never undo what I did," he told her one evening after the children were asleep. "But I want to be worthy of them, even if I can never be worthy of your forgiveness." The children's therapy sessions revealed the depth of their struggles. The twins expressed fear that Quentin would abandon them again. Baby drew pictures of two separate houses, one for happy days with just Madison, and another for new days with their expanded family. Their counselor explained that stability and consistency were crucial. They need to see that love can be reliable, she advised, even when it comes from unexpected or previously hurtful sources. Madison's own emotional journey was complicated by Eleanor's declining health. The woman who had become her source of strength was fading, leaving her to navigate these choppy emotional waters increasingly alone. "Trust your heart," Eleanor advised during one of her stronger moments. "It led you to protect your children, to build a new life, to face your fears. It won't lead you astray now." The process of healing wasn't linear. There were days when Madison could barely look at Quentin, days when the children's pain seemed overwhelming, days when the weight of their complicated family history threatened to crush them all. But there were also moments of unexpected grace, baby falling asleep in his father's arms during a hospital stay, the twins teaching Quentin their secret handshake, all three children working together to bake a cake for both their grandfathers. Through it all, they learned that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about building something new from its ashes. The children's struggles became opportunities for growth, their questions chances for honesty, their fears occasions for proving that love could be trustworthy after all. As Eleanor's condition worsened, the family's focus shifted from past hurts to present moments. The children's need for stability helped the adults set aside their own emotional turmoil to create a secure environment. In caring for their dying grandmother, they found a common purpose that began to heal their deepest wounds. The transformation wasn't just Quentin's journey of redemption or Madison's path through emotional turmoil, it was their entire family's evolution into something new and unexpected, something that honored the past's pain while reaching for a different future. Just as the family began finding its new rhythm, a shocking revelation emerged. Kiale, who had disappeared after the wedding fiasco, reappeared in the headlines. She had been admitted to a private hospital, 6 months pregnant. The father, it turned out, was her family's longtime lawyer, the man who had helped orchestrate her revenge plot against the Montgomerys. The news hit Quentin like a physical blow, not from jealousy, but from the realization of how completely he had been deceived. Kiale had been pregnant during their engagement, playing a role while carrying another man's child. The layers of her deception seemed endless. Madison's reaction surprised everyone, including herself. She felt a strange mix of pity and concern for Kiale's unborn child, remembering her own desperate pregnancy. "That baby is innocent," she told Eleanor during one of their quiet talks. "Just like our children were innocent of all the adult complications around them." The real crisis came 3 weeks later. Babia was at the hospital for a routine checkup when a nurse none of them recognized attempted to take him for additional tests. Something about her manner made Madison suspicious, and she insisted on accompanying them. The nurse's story unraveled under questioning, and security was called. The woman turned out to be working for Kiale, who had planned to use the kidnapping as leverage against the Montgomerys. In her twisted logic, she believed holding Quentin's sick child hostage would force the family to restore her damaged reputation. The attempt failed, but it left deep scars. Babia became terrified of hospitals, screaming whenever anyone in medical uniform approached him. His siblings developed separation anxiety, refusing to let him out of their sight. The incident brought Madison and Quentin closer, their shared protective instincts overriding past hurts. But during this turbulent time, Eleanor decided to share something she'd kept hidden for decades. In her study, behind a false panel she'd installed years ago, she kept a collection of letters, hundreds of them, written to Quentin throughout his life but never sent. "I wrote to you every week," she told him, her hands trembling as she handed over the carefully preserved bundles. "Every milestone, every thought, every hope I had for you. I couldn't be your mother then, but I never stopped loving you." The letters chronicled everything: his first steps seen from afar, his school achievements witnessed through newspaper clippings, her pride and her pain as she watched him grow up calling another woman mother. Some were just a few lines, others dozens of pages long. One letter, dated the day of his adoption, read, "My dearest son, today I had to make the hardest choice a mother can make. I hope someday you'll understand it wasn't for lack of love, but because of too much love. Love that wanted to protect you from the scandal that would have haunted your life." Quentin spent nights reading through the letters, discovering the mother he'd never known through her words. He learned about her strength, her sacrifices, and her unwavering love. The letters revealed a parallel life, one where he had been deeply loved and watched over, even when he didn't know it. Madison found her own letter among the collection, written the day Eleanor first met her at the hospital. "Today I met the woman carrying my grandchildren. She has your strength, Quentin, the strength I wish I'd had. I won't fail these babies like I failed you. This time I'll stand firm." The discovery of the letters changed something fundamental in their family dynamic. Quentin began spending more time with Eleanor, reading the letters aloud to her as her strength waned. The children would often curl up nearby, listening to stories of their father's childhood through their grandmother's eyes. But Eleanor had one final secret to share. Among the letters was a document proof that Kiai's father's company hadn't been destroyed by the Montgomerys at all. He had orchestrated his own downfall through illegal dealings, using Richard Montgomery as a scapegoat to hide his crimes from his daughter. "I found this years ago," Eleanor explained, "but revealing it would have exposed my connection to the Montgomerys. I couldn't risk losing the chance to watch over you, even from a distance." The truth about Kiale's father's downfall provided closure to old wounds, but it came with new responsibilities. The discovery meant that Kiale's unborn child was heir to a different legacy, one of deception rather than victimhood. Madison suggested reaching out to Kiale, offering to share the truth and perhaps help her find peace with her own past. "Our children will be connected through this history," she reasoned. "They shouldn't inherit our generation's bitterness." The letters became a bridge between past and present, helping heal old wounds while creating new understanding. They proved that love could survive silence, distance, and time, a lesson their complicated family needed desperately to learn. As Eleanor's health continued to decline, the letters took on new significance. They became her voice for the future, ensuring that her grandchildren would know her love even after she was gone. Each letter was a thread in the tapestry of their family story, weaving together loss and love, sacrifice and redemption. The failed kidnapping attempt had one positive outcome: it united the family in protecting their children. Richard increased security at both the house and the bakery. Quentin took a more active role in his children's daily lives, determined to never let them feel vulnerable again. Through it all, Eleanor's letters provided guidance and comfort. They showed that even in the darkest times, love could survive and find its way home. The family began writing their own letters, creating a new tradition of preserving their story for future generations. Baby A, still traumatized by the kidnapping attempt, found special comfort in the letters. He would ask for them to be read again and again, perhaps understanding intuitively the power of words to heal and connect across time and space. The letters became their family's sacred text, a testament to the power of unconditional love and the importance of truth. They proved that sometimes the most important words are the ones we think might never be read, and the strongest bonds are those forged through adversity and forgiveness. Among Eleanor's letters, Richard discovered one addressed specifically to him, dated just before she'd left town decades ago. The letter revealed a truth he'd never known: Eleanor had been pregnant when his family forced their separation. His own parents had known but hidden this information, manipulating both of them into believing the other had chosen to end their relationship. "I thought you'd abandon me," Richard confessed to Eleanor during one of their evening talks. "My father told me you'd accepted money to disappear. I was too proud, too hurt to investigate further." Eleanor's reply was soft but clear: "And I believed you'd chosen your family's reputation over our love. We were both victims of their manipulation, Richard, but our choices afterward were our own." The truth of their connection ran deeper. Richard had unconsciously chosen Quentin from the adoption agency because something in the boy's features reminded him of Eleanor. Their shared love of music, their identical mannerisms, all the things Richard had attributed to good upbringing, were actually inherited traits. Meanwhile, Madison's past held its own surprises. During the years she'd struggled alone with her pregnancy, she'd nearly married James Chen, a kind-hearted restaurant owner who'd offered her security and acceptance. Their engagement had lasted 3 months, ending just weeks before Eleanor entered her life. "I couldn't do it," Madison explained to Quentin when the truth emerged. "James was everything I should have wanted: stable, kind, accepting of the children. But what?" Quentin asked, his voice careful. "But he wasn't their father," she admitted quietly. "And I couldn't build a life on half-truths, no matter how comfortable they might have been." James had remained a friend, his restaurant supplying desserts from Madison's bakery. His recent wedding invitation arrived with a note thanking her for showing him what real love looked like, even if it wasn't their story to share. The deepest family secret emerged through a series of old photographs found in Eleanor's study. They revealed that Richard's mother, the family matriarch who had orchestrated Eleanor's departure, had herself been born into poverty. Her entire identity was fabricated, her background erased through her own wealthy marriage. This discovery explained her ruthless protection of the Montgomery name. She'd been terrified of anyone discovering her humble origins. Her treatment of Eleanor had been driven by fear that her own secret would be exposed. She destroyed our happiness to protect her lie, Richard realized, staring at evidence of his mother's deception. Everything, our separation, Quentin's adoption, years of loneliness, all because she was ashamed of her own past. The revelation changed something fundamental in Richard's understanding of his family legacy. The fortune he'd inherited, the social position he'd protected so fiercely, was built on a foundation of shame and deception. More secrets surfaced as they delved deeper into family records. Eleanor's own family's downfall had been orchestrated by Richard's parents, ensuring she would be too vulnerable to fight back when they demanded she give up her baby. The web of lies and manipulation spanned generations, touching every member of their combined families. Even Kealay's pregnancy had roots in this history. Her lover was the grandson of Richard's mother's first love, a connection too complex to be coincidental. These revelations fostered a new honesty among them all. They began sharing their own secrets, small and large, clearing the air of decades of deception. Madison confessed her brief engagement. Quentin admitted his early doubts about the children. Richard revealed his years of private detective reports on Eleanor's life. Each truth, however painful, helped heal old wounds and prevent new ones from forming. They made a pact to end the cycle of secrets, to give their children a legacy of honesty instead of carefully maintained lies. The final secret, found in Eleanor's last letter, was perhaps the most poignant. She had known about Richard's mother's true background for years, but had chosen not to use it as leverage. Some truths, she wrote, are better revealed by time than vengeance. This web of connections and secrets helped them understand that their family's story wasn't simply about love thwarted by pride or status. It was about the cost of denying one's true self, the price of maintaining appearances at the expense of happiness. Their challenge now was to build something new from these revelations, to create a family foundation based on truth rather than appearance. The children, watching their elders wrestle with past deceptions, learned valuable lessons about honesty and authenticity. As Eleanor's health failed, she found peace in knowing that all secrets had finally been revealed. The truth, however complex and painful, had set them all free to forge genuine connections and build real relationships. The legacy they would leave their children wouldn't be one of perfectly maintained appearances or carefully guarded secrets, but of honest love and genuine acceptance, a foundation strong enough to support whatever challenges the future might bring. Eleanor passed away on a quiet spring morning, surrounded by the family she had fought so hard to protect and unite. Her final days were filled with love, storytelling, and the laughter of her grandchildren. Before she left, she made them all promise to keep writing letters, to never let truth be buried by pride or fear again. The legacy she left went far beyond her material wealth. Her final will revealed that she had established a foundation in the triplets' names, dedicated to helping single mothers and children with medical needs. The bakery would become its first beneficiary, transformed into a training program for women rebuilding their lives. Madison honored Eleanor's memory by expanding the bakery's mission. Each morning, before opening, she taught baking skills to women from local shelters. "Everyone deserves a chance to create something beautiful," she would say, echoing Eleanor's words to her years ago. Quentin found his redemption not in regaining his corporate position, but in working with the foundation. His experience as both privileged heir and humbled janitor gave him unique insight into the barriers facing those seeking help. He used his business skills to create opportunities rather than accumulate power. Richard and Madison formed an unexpected bond, united by their love for Eleanor and determination to honor her wishes. He became the grandfather she'd never had, while she helped him learn to express love without conditions or expectations. The triplets grew stronger, their early struggles giving them unusual empathy for others. Baby A's heart condition improved with time, though he would always carry a physical reminder of the bonds that had brought their family together. His siblings remained fiercely protective, their early fears transformed into strength. MILLIONAIRE'S child was born a month after Eleanor's passing. Against all expectations, Madison reached out to her former rival, offering support and understanding. The gesture, inspired by Eleanor's example of forgiveness, began healing wounds that revenge could never satisfy. The letters continued, becoming their family's tradition. Each milestone, each challenge, each moment of joy was captured in words, creating a legacy of truth for future generations. Eleanor's collection grew as they added their own stories, their own lessons learned. Their final tribute to Eleanor came in the form of a garden behind the bakery, where herbs and flowers grew alongside benches bearing plaques with her favorite sayings. It became a place of peace and reflection, where the scent of fresh bread mingled with blooming roses, a reminder that beauty can grow from the most difficult circumstances. The family they built wasn't perfect, but it was real. Their story, with all its complications and pain, became one of hope, proof that love, honesty, and courage could overcome even the deepest wounds of pride and prejudice. As Madison watched her children playing in Eleanor's garden, she remembered her words, "Sometimes the families we choose are stronger than the ones we're born into." Looking at the gathering of people around her, Quentin teaching their son to prune roses, Richard sharing stories with the twins, even MILLIONAIRE'S child toddling among the flowers, she knew Eleanor had been right. Their legacy wasn't the Montgomery name or fortune, but the truth that love in all its forms was worth fighting for. Eleanor's final gift had been showing them that redemption was possible, that healing could come from the most unexpected places, and that it's never too late to choose love over pride. The bakery's bell chimed, carrying the promise of new beginnings with each ring, while Eleanor's garden bloomed eternal, a living testament to the power of truth, forgiveness, and the courage to begin again. Life's deepest wounds often come from those closest to us, but these same wounds can become the soil where love grows strongest. In this story, we witness how pride and status, those hollow markers of worth, can tear families apart, leaving scars that span generations. Yet it also shows us that it's never too late for love to heal what pride has broken. Through Madison's strength as a single mother, we learn that true dignity isn't found in social position, but in the courage to love unconditionally. Her journey from abandoned orphan to fierce protector of her children reminds us that our past pain doesn't define our capacity to love. Eleanor's secret letters to her son teach us the devastating price of silence, how years of unspoken love can haunt both the sender and receiver. Each letter was a tear unshed, a hug ungiven, a moment of motherhood sacrificed to society's expectations. When baby A, fighting for his life, reached for his father's hand despite never knowing him, we see how children's hearts remain pure even when adults' hearts grow hard. Their innocent love shows us that forgiveness isn't just possible, it's necessary for healing. The truth about family isn't in shared names or bloodlines, but in the choice to stay when staying is hard, to love when love seems impossible, and to forgive when forgiveness feels beyond reach. Sometimes the strongest families are built not from perfect histories, but from broken pieces carefully mended with tears, truth, and time. Every one of us carries some form of Eleanor's unsent letters, words we wish we'd spoken, love we wish we'd shown, truths we wish we'd told. Her story reminds us that it's never too late to say I love you, never too late to right a wrong, never too late to choose love over pride. In the end, we're all just trying to find our way home to that place where we're loved not for our status or achievements, but for our true selves. Sometimes that home isn't where we're born, but where we choose to plant our hearts and let them grow. Like Eleanor's garden, love blooms most beautifully in the places where pain once lived. Every flower that grows there is a reminder that healing is possible, that love can take root in the most wounded soil, and that our scars can become the maps that lead others home. May we all find the courage to send our unsent letters, to heal our unspoken wounds, and to choose love over pride before time runs out. Because in the end, it's not our successes or status that matter, but the love we dared to give, even when giving it broke our hearts. Remember Eleanor's final truth: sometimes the deepest love grows in the hardest places, and the most beautiful gardens bloom where tears have watered the soil. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and share it with those you love. Every like, comment, and share helps us reach more people with stories that remind us of what truly matters in life. Don't forget to leave your thoughts below. Your story might just help heal someone else's heart.